Good morning, everyone. This is Navin from Harcourt's Greater Springfield, and today we're talking with Shayne Guy from Best Pool Heating and Pool Maintenance and Safety. We're going to be talking about pool regulations, pool maintenance, and some innovations in pool technology that allow us to get the best from our pools. So let's hear from Shayne. So Shayne, for the first question, can you explain a bit more about pool boundaries?
Yeah, I sure can. Boundary fences are pretty important when it comes to pool regulations and the safety of all those kind of things. Your neighbour's fence is also your responsibility, having things that make sure they're not climbable. So kids, mainly around 5 years old, can't climb over and into your swimming pool. And that boundary is your responsibility as well, yeah.
So when you say pool boundaries, are we only concerned about the boundary from within your property? Or do we have to be worried about accessing your pool from your neighbour's boundary as well?
Yeah, good question. It's also your responsibility. Once a child has climbed and into your fence, that is your responsibility, or an adult that maybe can't swim so well. But it is your responsibility to make sure that your boundary fence between you and your neighbour or you and a council is pool regulation safe. So that might be making some adjustments so it is compliant.
So then what about if you have a pool that's sitting at the edge of your fence and on the other side, on your neighbor's side, there's a structure that's climbable and someone can actually climb onto that structure and access your pool that way?
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, you want to start having a good conversation with your neighbours and explaining them why, maybe showing them the regulations. Hopefully we all get along with our neighbours. And, if they've got a pool as well, they will really understand why. And then you've both got to be compliant. If you are having any issues, you just got to take it upon yourself to make sure that you maybe install something new, maybe a new structure or anything like that, so that you know that you're compliant on your side and that you can't be climbed into.
So can you explain a bit more about updated regulations for gating for our pools?
Yeah, so gates, there's a few important things with gates. Making sure that they do self-close and latch properly, that when they close, they don't bounce off the gate latch itself. If that's what happens, they do need to be repaired or possibly replaced. They all need to meet the same standard as a fence, so they need to be a 1.2 high. There's a few materials that the common ones, glass, aluminium are the two most common ones, but there's a few different products coming out now that do meet the regulations. But it is important that, when looking at your own pool gate, that, the latch is high enough that a child can't reach it at 1.5 metres high, and the hinges can't be stood on, and it self-closes. They're the three main important things.
Okay. And what about how the gate opens? Is there a particular direction in which the gate has to swing open?
The gates must open outwards.
Yeah.
There is no exception to that rule. They have to open outwards, yeah.
So with the pool fencing and gating, what about the gap that's beneath the fencing and the gates? Is there a minimum required height for that gap?
The gaps on all surrounds, on the bottom, in between the palings themselves, is 100 millimetres. So it can't be greater than. So if it gets to 100, that's okay. But we try and look for, let's call it 99 millimetres, so we know that we are compliant. If you find that in a garden bed in particular, where there is some discrepancies, putting rocks or just more bark down doesn't make that compliant. It needs to be quite a solid structure. Yeah. So a lot of people might concrete some bricks and pop them in some concrete to make sure that is 100 millimetres, or as simple as putting some fixings along the bottom of the gate.
Yep.
And it's attached to the gate, whether it's some decking railings or some perspex, so it is nice solid structure, yeah.
So you can't have any point that's more than 100 millimetres?
No points at all. That's deemed that 100 millimetres is accessible into the pool area.
Wow, okay. So for steps then, you can't have a fencing that runs diagonally down straight on a straight line. It has to be staggered.
No, that's right. So you need to have your pool barrier or your fence adjusted so there is no gaps at all. And it's quite common. We're seeing a lot of blocks these days that are terraced or a split block,
yep,
where you step down into the pool area, or the pool area is coming off a balcony or something like that. There is nothing more than 100 millimetres, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk a bit more about CPR signs now. So where should we display them? Are they mandatory? And is there a time frame in which we have to get them checked?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Yes, they're mandatory. You've got to have one, and it needs to be in an area where it can be seen from the whole area of the pool, the whole landscaping area. So usually on the fence, on the gate, in the middle somewhere is great. It needs to be sized correctly. The one I've brought with me today is a nice big one. This one here, that's a great size. It really stands out. The other size you can get, it's about an A4 size.
Yep.
If you buy them from any reputable retailer, they'll meet the Australian standard for everything that's involved on there.
Yeah. And should these CPR signs be placed facing outside the pool or facing inside of the pool?
They must face the inside of the pool area.
Yes.
So you can actually see from inside the pool, if you do have to perform any CPR or anything like that, you can look up at the sign and see it clearly.
And how often do they get updated?
They get updated when the CPR rules change. So the pool industry is aligned with these associations to go, once they've decided that the CPR methods will change, they will update the signs and release a new one. That's when you need to update it, because your pool must stay compliant all the time.
Yeah, okay. So there's no specific guideline that you have to update it every 3 months or 6 months. So the onus is on the pool owner to update the CPR signs every time the regulations change with regards to CPR. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. But I also think that it's important, twice a year to do your own barrier check to make sure that everything's up to scratch, let's call it. So if your pool CPR sign can't be read anymore, or it gets broken, it's faded in the sun, you've had pool toys leaning up against it and they've scratched it, it's time to replace it anyway.
So with regards to regulations, are there any regulations surrounding pool maintenance in particular?
Yeah, there's a few, and not many fall into this case, but your pool should be maintained all the time. So if it becomes green and swampy, and it gets reported, what it becomes is unsafe, and the council can actually enforce you to have that cleaned up. Yeah.
And so is that more from a visibility point of view?
Yeah, and a safety point of view. So if you start attracting mosquitoes and toads, basically you're breeding a swamp. And it does happen where we're called under an enforcement order to have that cleaned up.
And how about the bottom of the pool? Are there any regulations about maintenance for the pool ground?
No, there's no regulations around that.
Yep.
It is ideal if you have a tiled pool, for example, and you start to get any tiles fall off the bottom, it does become a little unsafe to use. So, you can be scratching your toes, and you don't want to cut yourself in the water. Yeah.
Okay, so leading on from pool maintenance, can you touch a bit more about how we can maximize the usage of a pool for where we are in this region in Southeast Queensland?
Yeah, so we live in a pretty diverse region weather-wise. So it can be really hot, it can be really cold. It's not, if you go a bit further down the coast, you get a bit more stability in your weather. So there's 3 things that are important when it comes to looking after your pool: sanitation, circulation, and filtration. So sanitation being the chlorine in the water, filtration being the filter that actually cleans the water, and your circulation being the pump that circulates your water around the pool. So those 3 things, having them maintained all the time is really important. Having a water test done, say once a month, maybe at your local pool shop, or you have someone come and look after it for you. That's more important in winter than it is in summer, because typically nobody's looking at your pool. But in winter, these days, more and more pools are getting heated, and so you can use your pool all through the year. So having those 3 sanitation, filtration and circulation things on point all the time ensures your pool's looking good all the time.
So this brings us to part 2, where we're going to talk about pool designs and the pros and cons, or maybe just the differences between the different types of pools we have. So can you tell us a bit more about the different types of pools?
Yeah, sure. I think if you can dream it now, you can have it designed. That as technology comes a long way, it's just a matter of bringing your concept to life in your pool. We live in an area now where blocks are getting smaller, so they need to get more creative with how they put in a pool in a backyard, which has really brought to life things like plunge pools, where they crane them over your house. As long as there's somewhere they can drop them in, it's like bringing in a spa, but it's actually a swimming pool. So that's probably one of the most popular new pool designs around. There's a fiberglass is another one. It's something you can certainly get constructed a lot quicker. They'll dig the hole, drop the shell in, and then build the landscaping around that. But if you've got something that's a bit tricky, where you need to go around a corner or avoid particular sewer areas in your block, particular pipework or electrical, the designs can get really fun and creative because they can shape them to whatever you want or whatever you need. The benefits are always great in whatever design you choose because you get to swim in a swimming pool all year round if you like, yeah.
So just to dive a bit deeper, in your opinion, are there some pools that are better suited to certain types of environments?
So I think you've got to think about what you want to get out of your pool and the environment that you're in. So if you're on a sloped block, you really want to probably look at it, I think, a concrete type pool or a precast plunge pool, because they can build them into a structure that is concrete based. And not only that, on the low side, if you are on that terrace block, you've actually got a concrete wall rather than a bare space, say underneath a deck. So it does seem to be a lot more secure.
Yeah.
Myself not being, a structural engineer or a builder, all I can see is the benefits from a pool technician's point of view or an aesthetic point of view. The plunge pools have been really popular on these terrace blocks because it is a concrete structure and you are going to get a very long time out of that. They also are resurfaceable. So down the track, if in 20, 30 years time, it does need to be resurfaced, they can just be resurfaced. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so when you say resurface, what exactly do you mean?
So if you've got tiles that get tired or the glass pebble or pebblecrete in the older pools, that can be taken away and then reapplied, yeah.
So do you find that for pool owners within this region, are there any specific details you think they have to pay attention to?
I do. I think what's important to think about is getting it right the first time. So if you were getting a new pool or buying a house that needs a pool that needs renovated and you might need to upgrade the gear, have a think about what your purpose is of using the pool if you're going to use it all year round, and not to undersize any equipment. In our climate, because we can get quite warm, we're subtropical here, we're in the Brisbane area, having equipment that is suitable for a pool of your size is probably the most important thing when it comes to thinking about what to do. If you undersize equipment through the depths of summer, it's quite likely you're going to have a green pool a lot.
Yeah, okay. So for where we are in this region, what do you think are three biggest challenges that pool owners face in maximizing the use of your pool?
I think three, you'd probably look at the weather to one, so it can get quite cool. So to maximize that, that's where we look at heating and pool blankets. That can really give you a full year's worth of use, or even if you just want to extend your summer. Even in this warmer climate here, most people still only use their pool up to about March. So if you've got let's call it an $80,000 investment in your backyard, being able to use it for a far lot longer is pretty important. One of the other things is its environment. So if you've got a lot of leaves in your environment, having the appropriate cleaner or cover for your pool. Yeah. And the other one is making sure that the water that you have in your pool is suitable to your needs.
Can you share a bit more about pool blankets?
So pool blankets, there's a few types. A lot of them look like a big roll of blue bubble wrap over the water. That can lock in your heat.
Oh.
It will save you evaporation. So we lose a lot of water in our swimming pools through evaporation from the sun, but we lose just as much through windy conditions as well. Yeah. So if you live a bit higher up on a hill and it's windy, having a pool blanket will really save a lot of water loss, and it'll save you money on chemicals because the sun's not evaporating all that out of the pool.
Okay, so when we talk about the differences between pool blankets and heating, what are the differences and when should someone decide, I'm going to go with a pool blanket or instead I'm going to go with pool heating?
So if you decide you're going to get a pool heater, having a pool blanket is like closing the lid on the esky or shutting the fridge door. You don't want to be losing all that heat, especially overnight. If you're out a little bit west in the western suburbs, it can get pretty cold. And if you lose all of that heat, you've got to heat your water from the bottom up again. A pool blanket is a great place to start if you just want to get an extra few weeks, maybe 4 weeks out of your swimming season. It will add typically a month either side of summer. Yeah, keep that water a little bit warmer. But to get that extra point into the cooler months, heating is the way to go. And electric heat pumps give you that climate control like a ducted air system would in your house.
Okay, so then in terms of price point difference, are we talking a considerable difference in prices?
Yeah, and it is an investment. Pool heating is definitely something to consider if you want to use your pool, but it does cost a bit of money. You're going to start for a system with a blanket, of course.
Yep.
For a small pool, you're probably looking at around $4,000, and we go up from there. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump back to the previous point you mentioned about water and having the right type of water in your swimming pool. That raised my eyebrows a little. Can you explain a bit more about what you're saying? And my assumption is water is just water.
Water is just water until you put it in a swimming pool. Water, a traditional pool was a chlorine pool. You'd pour liquid chlorine in it every day to make sure it was clean. And then we come up with salt technology.
Yep.
So we have a saltwater chlorinator, and through process, the salt is turned into chlorine, which keeps your water clean. There's no pool really that doesn't have chlorine in it. In Australia, we have to have chlorine in the water or some residue of it to call it a swimming pool.
Oh, okay.
And as technology advances, we now have minerals, which is effectively using a salt system, adding magnesium and other minerals into the water.
Yep.
And then we can get even further down the line, and there's some great technology out there that allows us to swim in almost fresh water. And when I say fresh water, rather than using chlorine as the main sanitation system,
Yep.
there's things like copper and silver, or there's ozone, or there's UV light, all these different technologies that are coming in to make that water a fresher feel.
But you still have to have some amount of chlorine inside.
That's right. So typically we have, if it's a chlorine pool, of around about 4 for a traditional chlorine pool. That's parts per million of chlorine. And then we get down to about 2 when it comes to a traditional salt pool. Then we get down to about 1 to 2 when it's a mineral pool.
Yep.
But when we get down into some of these newer technologies, we can actually look at having a 0.5 level of chlorine in your pool. There's actually one manufacturer that claims that your pool water is so good you could drink it.
Okay, so before we end off this discussion, one of the last few questions I have is about robotic cleaners. So I recently watched a video where a robotic cleaner was clinging along the side of the wall of a swimming pool and apparently cleaning it. So can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, the robotic cleaner market is getting very popular. More and more people are having them at home because they want to get some of their time back. With a robot cleaner, they can start with just cleaning the floor, but they go all the way up to the top end where they're cordless and you can drive them around using an app on your phone, which is pretty cool. But the majority of ones in the backyard do have a cord. They don't connect into your typical suction side. So it actually lets the pool skim the leaves off the top while it cleans the floors, the wall and the steps. They help your water be clearer. They take a lot of stress off your filtration system.
Yep.
And I believe that they are a great addition to every backyard pool because of the benefits you get from you not having to clean it.
Yep.
And the stress it takes off your filter.
Yeah, I get what you mean. It's just like the robotic vacuum cleaner we have at home. Automatically cleans the floors in 30 minutes every day. We go in once a week to do the heavy lifting with the Dyson, but at least throughout the week, the floors are pretty clean.
Yeah, very similar. With the robotic cleaner, they don't live in your pool like the old suction cleaners did. It's something that you might put in when you go to work in the morning. You come back at home from work, take it out of the pool. They have their own little tank that have picked up all the debris. You clean that out and you can pop that back in the shed. They're designed to go in your pool maybe 2 or 3 times a week. They run for a few hours and that's all they need to do. Because they do such a good job, they scrub your water line and all that kind of stuff. They'll save you a lot of maintenance. And then on the weekends, if you're out swimming in your pool, that's when you might take a little bit more attention to anything that it may have missed. But the robots these days are getting more and more efficient. Some of them even map your pool while they're operating.
Yeah. And so before we finish off, can you share a bit more about the 2 different brands and the services you offer under those brands?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to do this. Best Pool Heating is a brand that I created to really focus on the pool heating market. Pool heating in the Brisbane region is getting quite popular. And we've aligned with probably one of the best manufacturers that there is around to provide pool heating solutions for every pool that we can, whether it's a small pool or a large commercial pool. There's always a solution somewhere. So that's my best pool heating. And then I have pool maintenance and safety, and it really focuses on the water of the pool, which when we focus on the water, we need to get our equipment right. So if you have a skin condition, maybe we need to look at a particular magnesium or a freshwater option, so you can use your pool all year round.
Yeah.
So having that right, and then in that same thing with the pool maintenance and safety inspection. So making sure your pool is safe, compliant, and meets all the regulations.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for your time again, Shayne. I really appreciate you doing this video with me. Have a good one.
Thanks very much, Navin.